SMTN.
How's it going, everybody, and welcome to Shin Megami Tensei Network Link 361. I'm your host, Spencer Presley, who will probably not be talking 4.5 hours about Metaphor ReFantazio this week. Joining me to maybe not talk a lot about Metaphor spoilers is the one and the only Len, joining me after, 1.5 cryo chamber sleeps? It's only been like half a decade.
Yeah, 2021, I think, is the last time I was on here. Yeah, I was on this podcast
Let's be honest.
when I was 12. Yeah. So.
I mean, let's be honest. 4 years ago basically feels like 20 years ago at this point.
More or less, yeah. There was some kind of time vortex going on there that, yeah, anything before, like, 2003 was, like, 10 years ago, so.
Now, like, let's be honest. Did you think that in 4 years there would be a complete, separate, similar re-release of Shin Megami Tensei 5, the whole reason you were even on here to begin with? At least that quickly.
I guess I didn't, but now I sort of get what Atlus's release cycle generally looks like, so maybe I should have expected it, but yeah. I was gonna say, if you want me to talk for 4 hours about Metaphor, I could, but I think you are probably a little burned out on that. So.
You know what's funny? I'm still working on other things for it, which is funny. And even though like our spoiler cast was that long, there were still things that as soon as I was done editing it, because it was about 5 hours of audio altogether, and like it was even split up across multiple days. But it was one of those things of like, even when it was done and uploaded, I was like, I could have mentioned that. Oh, damn.
Yeah,
I should have brought that. Like, there's just never enough time, which is why I always find it so funny of, like, I love really, really kind of long, nerdy, like, in-depth conversations about games, and then I always find it so funny of, like, and I mentioned this on the show as well, of, like, how popular Metaphor is and how there's, like, no long-form discussions about it. Like, the longest spoiler cast for it is, like, 68 minutes.
Yeah, it is kind of strange that it sort of passed in and out of the discourse without a lot of fanfare. I think it even ended up getting overall game of the year for IGN. It was my game of the year for sure.
Yeah, I think for them, I mean, Lord knows, award-wise and sales-wise, Atlus couldn't care more at this point. Like they made out like crazy. Like they even won. They got the RPG award for DICE last week or like 2 weeks ago. But yeah, I think it was like GameSpot Game of the Year. Like pretty much everything in their mother like gave it a bajillion awards last year. So either that or Belacher or Astrobot. That was pretty much the split.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It was IGN's overall game of the year as well. So yeah, it was. I guess like maybe it hasn't been out long enough for there to be like that second wave yet of things about it. But yeah, I don't know.
Well, I mean, we just need to wait now, like another month and a half till the Switch 2 reveal. Then they will unsurprisingly announce they're putting Metaphor on the Switch 2, and they're adding Nuris as a playable party member, and then we'll just start talking about the game all over again.
We finally finished the Mage Academy dungeon that's going in.
The funny one was, like, that came up with the game, and we were like, clearly, everybody knows that something cut from this game. Only question is, when the inevitable re-release happens, will they add more? Because I think ironically, if they pumped it out quick enough, they could probably even charge for it. But if they waited too long and then didn't add enough, it would just be like, okay, what are we doing here?
Right, exactly. So.
But yes, in case anyone does not know you from your great Metaphor opinions and very popular IGN reviews. Who are you? What have you been up to? What do you do? And how many podcasts do you like to hijack?
Yeah, I'm Len. I am a freelance video game writer, mostly doing RPGs and strategy. for IGN, PC Gamer, a couple other places, occasionally. Actually, Epic now. They're like Epic Store news page. I write a lot of stuff for them these days.
Oh,
Um,
nice.
yeah, that's Brian Crescente, his new gig. So, um, yeah, and I guess to this SMT community, I became infamous for my uh, persona without the heart comments about Shin Megami Tensei 5, which was my second Atlas game ever after Persona 5. So obviously my experience of it was very different from the long-term, you know, SMT Atlas fan experience of it. Although I will say, I have somewhat been vindicated, and that a lot of people after actually playing it agreed with me that the character stuff was a little bit shallow. So sometimes, if you wait long enough, the take
I
everybody
mean,
thought was
even
bad.
even the dev team said that. I mean,
Yeah,
hell, you had the even leading up to Vengeance, they were like, you know what, we could have done a little more with the characters.
yeah.
Yeah, and for the low price of $60, you too can correct that mistake.
Yeah, I do. I actually think I like SMT5 more now than when I originally played it. More now that I've thought back on it more. I really like the Matsukami ending in particular because it's cool to become Satan and kill God, but I think it's even better to put the old gods of the land back on the throne that God usurped. That's a pretty cool ending when I think about it. So.
Well, and one of the things I thought was most funny was the only way it could have been more in line. Obviously, you didn't review Vengeance for IGN. That was Michael Hyam.
Mhm.
And I meant to give Michael shit about this. He failed at the long-running IGN tradition of re-release of a game is better in every way, lower score. I mean, the whole thing is always it's a different reviewer.
Right, right.
But
Yeah.
it's like you have to give it like lower because I always think of that great comparison of like Xenoblade One to like Xenoblade Definitive Edition.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
Because the internet loves that. They love seeing like time and scores. Like, all right, it's been 6 years since this game came out. It was originally a 9, 7, 8.
yeah, I technically failed at that too with P5 Royal because I didn't review the original P5. But then I think they gave it a 9 and I gave Royal a 10. So
Come on, we're we're nothing if not a glutton for traditions around here.
yeah, it really is true. IGN is completely crashed out. We've watched. Yeah. So yeah.
Now, I guess actually, just out of curiosity with it, have you had a chance to play Vengeance at all since it came out last year?
I haven't played Vengeance yet, and it's just been a matter of that I haven't been able to find time in my schedule for it. I am very interested in playing it at some point, but I just haven't found the time for it yet. So,
Yeah, I would be especially interested not only with the character changes they make, but at least thankfully more user friendly, especially compared to Royal. You just straight up get to experience mostly new content because they split up the paths. So at least you wouldn't kind of be forced to have to play through the original base game. Because for the most part, Canon of Creation is very much that original game you played in 2021. And then Vengeance is about 30% still the same, and then the rest of it is all new
oh,
stuff.
interesting.
But even, honestly, the funny thing is, even with that, they add in a lot of other stuff that's interesting quality of life stuff, whether it be like overworld changes. But then the other thing as well that is weird they didn't implement into both is only in Canon of Vengeance are you able to have human party members, like as guest
Oh,
characters that you get
interesting.
to control.
Okay. So does Vengeance have its own set of endings, or is there a Vengeance
Yep.
ending that is just
That is the only reason I don't have the platinum for
okay?
SMT5, just for the fact that I did all the endings in the original game because it was like, okay, there was like, what, 4 or 5, maybe like 6, but then the fact that like now there's like double-digit endings because you have to do both playthroughs.
Okay, so you can play Vengeance and like still side with Amaterasu and stuff. Okay.
Yes, and the cool thing I will say, they do a nice thing at least of you get many, many rewards for playing New Game Plus and switching routes. So, like, you do get, like, tangible differences of, like, okay, now that you've done this in the original game, this will either be easier, or maybe now you've unlocked a new super boss. Because they do a cool little thing of, depending on what route you play first, there's no right or wrong one to pick, but if you play Vengeance first, in Creation you unlock a new super boss, and then vice versa for when you beat the other one.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'll have to get around to that. It is tough because, like, if it's a huge long RPG like that, and I don't get assigned to review it for work, like it becomes way harder to find time for it because, I'm not getting paid, and there probably is another huge RPG coming out that I am getting paid to play. So it's like, yeah, I just try to sneak them in there when I can.
Yeah, and it's got to be hard to justify as well, especially just because with the type of games you review,
Yeah,
I'm gonna take a hunch and assume you probably played more than 10 hours of Civ 7.
yeah. I think it was like 71 or 72 at the time that I actually wrote the review. So yeah.
By the way, where are you at with the Civ discourse? I've thought it's been very interesting. Um, Taking the general fan feedback into it, because I think there was like a little bit, maybe that first week or two, of like, if you wanted to try and pretend Civ 7 sucks because Harriet Tubman's there, we're just going to laugh you out of the room.
Right.
But like, I did really think the discussion was interesting about the changes from simplifying it, things they added to it, and kind of where it's at now of like, because I think you even mentioned this in review of like, if people don't know, with like Civilization, every Civ is gonna look a little worse when it launches, just because every previous game gets like 5+ years of updates and DLC. It's like, it's hard not to look like a downgrade even with all the additions.
Yeah, I mean, I've also talked fairly extensively on Three Moves Ahead, which is my podcast about strategy games, about Civ 7, but I think it has potential to be good, but yeah, it's in kind of rough shape right now. More so than I would expect for a Civ game at launch, even though, yeah, obviously every Civ game at launch has been pretty regarded as like worse than what the previous game was with 2 or 3 expansions. So, yeah.
I feel though, like, there's different kind of like levels to it, especially like, while this is no Civ 6, it's not like it's a Beyond Earth. It's like, this is
Mhm.
clearly a game that's going to have legs, whereas like something like, you look at something like Beyond Earth was very much like, this is a cool, interesting step forward. No one wants to stick it through to the end.
Yeah, I mean, Beyond Earth was like a very elaborate Civ 5 mod. Is sort of what I how I ended up feeling about it. That they charged a full game price for. But, yeah, it had some cool ideas.
But I mean, kind of other stuff. We talked about this a little bit before recording. Outside of like Civ or other things, what have you been playing? What have you been reviewing outside of that, or anything you're allowed to talk about?
When is this episode going live?
This will be up after. I mean, I doubt you're reviewing Monster Hunter, but I mean,
No,
hey, if you
no.
are, this should be up on the 26th at the latest.
Okay, yeah. So I'm my review of Two Point Museum will be up by then, which is
Oh my God, I forgot that's this week.
yeah. So yeah, I liked it a lot. I actually think Two Point has sort of figured out their formula and sort of hit their stride at this point. So yeah, they're the sort of spiritual successors to like Theme Hospital. Like they do these business tycoon type games, but with sort of like a silly, sarcastic tone.
How did I forget that this was this
Yeah,
month? My God, February is insane.
yeah. Like I'm not even on Monster Hunter, and I've felt way too busy this month so far. So yeah, the people doing the Monster
Also,
Hunter.
extra brave of Sega to do that like a week after Yakuza.
Yeah, like, and I don't know when I'm gonna find time for that either. So it's like, geez, yeah, it's been a wild month for game releases.
By the way, the only question I have, I've messed around more so with Hospital than Campus, and have been like kind of aware of Museum with it.
Mhm.
Where would you kind of put it in the ranking of those three out of them? Just because I liked the idea of Campus, but it was never enough to make me kind of want to pick it up. Whereas like the nostalgia of those like older games, like kind of from like the early 2000s, had me more interested in Hospital.
I personally think that each one got a little bit better than the last.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say Hospital is it's okay for a little bit. I think it kind of runs out of steam pretty quickly. And then Campus, they started to differentiate more. Where like, okay, I'm on this map, I'm running a night school or like for actual nights with a K. Like, and then they kind of expanded on that idea with Museum even more. I also just like the fact that it's museum is more about impressing the guests, sort of in the same way as like a roller coaster tycoon, whereas campus and hospital is more like get them in, get them out. We got a job to do. This is more like I'm gonna put up cool decorations because people will think it's awesome and give me a good review.
I do like how somehow, whether it be like by choice or just by circumstance, the like reviews I see you on the most very heady strategy games or like very heavy RPG ones because it's like they're not that much of a crossover on the Venn diagram there.
Yeah, it's I rarely ever get tapped anymore to do something that's like small and simple. Because that's just what I specialize in is really complex strategy games and like really like hardcore sort of RPGs and survival crafting, sometimes horror, but yeah, it tends to be the in-depth games that they're gonna call me up about.
Would you say you have a preference for one versus the other? Because that's always the funny one of like with as much as I talk about
Mhm.
RPGs, I still like so many other genres. I wouldn't say more, but it's one of those things of like almost because I don't get to play them as much, I almost kind of appreciate like there was a moment like I was talking to my wife and she's like, "Yeah, it's weird. I feel like you don't really enjoy like big open world games anymore." I'm like, "Oh my God, I do. I just normally don't get to play that many of them in the way that like I know life them just cuz there was that era where I felt like we were getting tons of open world games and then the industry was like, "Oh, we cannot financially keep this up," and then like really pulled back on it. Whereas like now, like really big, massive non RPG open world games are kind of few and far between.
Yeah, it is like there is definitely a sort of a like a burnout that happens. Like I go through phases sometimes where if I just reviewed a bunch of like really long RPGs back to back, I want to like play a strategy game as my comfort game, or if I've only been reviewing big strategy games, I just want I want to play like a JRPG or something that has completely different sort of core mechanics. So yeah, I don't know if I guess I would have to say strategy is like my first love because like Warcraft 2 in like 1995 was like the game that got me into PC gaming. But yeah, if I had to pick between them, but it definitely goes through phases.
Okay.
Yeah.
Last year, outside of like playing Persona 3 and Metaphor, what were some kind of highlights for you?
Oh, let me pull up I actually did a game of the year list here.
I know there was only like 9,000 games that came out last year.
Yeah, I mean, obviously everybody was playing Helldivers. I think that was like, like I had like
That
the weirdest. It would be like a coworker of mine from like PC Gamer, and then like a friend from high school, and we would be in the same Helldivers squad because like everybody was playing it for that first month. Um, there was I really liked Tactical Breach Wizards, which is sort of this
oh
yeah
okay.
turn-based tactics game where you're playing as like a wizard SWAT team kind of is almost how I would describe it. Where they all have different powers. Like one is a necromancer, one is like a time mage who can rewind your turns and stuff. So that's kind of cool. Shadows of Doubt was really good. That's kind of a procedurally generated open world detective game. And then Caves of Cud, which is it's like a traditional old school hardcore roguelike with like sort of NES era sort of graphics to it, and it's just really well written and has like really deep RPG systems. So those were some of my other favorites from last year.
Nice.
Yeah,
Anything kind of upcoming you're looking forward to? By the way,
yeah.
I always find myself looking at like upcoming video game releases for the year. This has got to be one of the weirdest years of like, all right, and less so after the last like month of showcases we had, but it was so funny. It was like, all right, you have every game imaginable from April and earlier, and then from like May to December was like a barren wasteland if no one wants to touch it. But like
Uh,
even with that, it's like there's so much more now, and it's like I feel sad saying this. I am legitimately too excited to play Xenoblade Chronicles X again. I don't need to be that excited about a game I know will be 99% the same game I played 10 years ago, but god, I can't wait to play that game again.
See, I never played the original, so I'm just looking forward to playing the updated version. So,
It's
yeah,
so good.
yeah,
It's so
what
good.
everybody's told me. Yeah. It also is like weird because like nobody really announces stuff that early anymore. Like the calendar I'm looking at basically ends in May, and there's a couple things that are
Yeah.
like October or November. But like Elden Ring Night Rain, I think I'm pretty excited to check that out. Um, what else is like right around the corner here? Not a lot that compared to what the last 30 days has been. Um,
I'm opening my heart up once again for like the first time in maybe like a decade. I don't even know when the last mainline one I played was,
mhm.
but I am cautiously hopeful, not only for the team, but also just because I like the idea of it. I hope Assassin's Creed is good. I
Oh yeah.
really hope it is. I think it looks good.
Mhm. No, I always hope it's good, and I think they kind of like it's a series that's like I feel like it's always going to be like a 7 or an 8 for me, and that's fine. It's like they'll keep putting those out, and it'll be like a good 7 or an 8, and I'll probably get bored of it before I finish all of the content because they're way too long. But yeah, I like Assassin's Creed. I've been playing those for a long time now, so.
Shout out to that team though. For doing one of the rare things you don't normally see from dev teams of being like, "Hey, our last game was too long. This one will be shorter," and that being a
Yes,
good thing.
exactly. Yeah, like if I think Assassin's Creed games in general were shorter, I would be more into the series because yeah, I mean,
That's why I really wanna try Mirage. Although the funny thing is, kind of going back to like my lapsed open world stuff,
mm,
I weirdly kind of want to do like a uh, nightmare marathon run because I haven't played anything like for a dedicated amount of time since they started doing the open world RPG stuff. So like I really kind of want to just like main path like Origins all the way to Valhalla, but I know that's no way impossible that that's going to happen before Shadows. But I think like if I dig Shadows enough, I might do that just because even at like the most like because none of those games are really like not well regarded is the thing is like if the biggest complaint most Assassin's Creed games I heard after they started doing Origins and stuff was like it's a little long, but it's still worth playing. I'm like I'd still check it out because like I'm just such a stupid history nerd that I enjoy looking at it more, almost more than anything.
yeah, yeah. I mean, that's always been a big part of why I've enjoyed that series too. So yeah.
Kind of looking a bit ahead with it, and kind of going back to what we were talking about last year, Atlas had the audacity to just release at least 5 years worth of games in about a 12 calendar month system.
Right. Yeah.
Which is extra funny because I'll still see people every now and then like online be like, "What the heck? They don't have any new games announced." And I'm like, "We." It's like that's like someone complaining there's not a new Yakuza game announced already. It's like,
Right.
guys, we don't need it. We can take the break.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I would bet Persona 6 will probably be announced this year. So you can chill.
For sure, but I mean, I think
Yeah.
outside of the like already leaked like Raito game coming out, which is just like an HD re-release of a much shorter game, I'm cool if it's just like a port year for like a year or two
Mhm.
outside of announcements. Because I think like announcements is fine or whatever with it, but in terms of releases, it was so funny of like, I'm now just finally getting to their final game that they released last year. And it was even more crazy if you actually count from Metaphor to Persona 5 Tactica, they did 5 games released back to
Yeah,
back in like
yeah.
less than 12 months. And it's like, man, it's a lot. None of those games are short.
No.
All of them good, unfortunately. If they weren't good, it'd be so much easier just to be like, well, I'll not play that now.
Yeah, I was
But
surprised by how much I liked Tactica actually.
Tactica that's going to be one that's going to have like a revisionist history, in the sense of I think a lot of people are going to nope out of that game because of how it looks and
Mhm.
its release timing.
Yeah.
It was one of those weird ones though. If they waited too long, like the Persona 5 hype train went on for so long, but then you look at how long they took to even releasing something like Persona 5 Royal and the dancing games and Strikers versus like I think there's a way to consistently put all the games they released for Persona 5 out in a way that would have let them all breathe better and kind of flow a lot better in terms of attention. Because I've heard a lot of people be like, "Oh, yeah, I'm fine. I'm not a fan of the chibi art style, or I'm not necessarily a huge tactics fan of." If someone tries it though, absolutely loving it.
Yeah.
Also, another one of like, kind of a shame they didn't really get back into doing this until last year. I think that would be a game that the public demo they showed off in Japan and showed press 2 years ago, back when it was getting shown off, that game demos really well. It has a fun, fast gameplay, and the story is not too in your face enough with it. Of like, I think there's a way that it will really save for it, but that game, it's like it's been bargain bin to hell and back with it. It's like I think it's kind of relegated to like the Soul Hacker 2 era of like great game, missed a couple of spots, and just a complete sales failure.
Yeah, it is weird because like I've talked before about how like Persona 5 spin-offs are are just like a weird they have a weird I have a weird relationship with them because I kind of feel like if it had been up to me, like Persona 5 Royal would have been this definitive thing and then it would have been over. Like we're not going to do a million spin-offs. Obviously that's not how the games industry works. If something is successful, you make more of it because I think it's such a perfect self-contained story that like I don't know that I would have greenlit Persona 5 Tactica, but since it exists and, I got to play it, I had a good time with it.
I still can't believe, and I say this so much, but it is never not true, that they made that internally. I remember when I
Yeah.
saw that game, I'm like, oh, clearly they farmed that out to some other like Japanese party who does like tactical RPGs. And the fact that it's not only did they do it internally, and it was their first attempt, and how good it is, I'm like, that's like extra kudos for me.
Hmm. Yeah.
Because like that is definitely a genre that you can fuck up easy, and not fuck up in a way of like make a bad game. Like there are a lot of great ideas for tactic RPGs that are just boring.
Yeah, it is hard to do it really well. It's like disproportionately hard to do it really well. Because you have to get the interplay between the different characters and the level design and the status effects and the movement abilities to sort of gel, and it's a lot of compounding factors on top of each other. Um, Check out Tactical Breach Wizards if you want an example of a game that did that all really really well. But Tactica did it pretty
By
well
the
too.
way, the funny thing I forgot to mention when you said this, the thing that got me interested into Tactical Breach Wizards was, well, I guess first the music has a surprisingly really good soundtrack,
Hmm.
and when I had a friend describe to me how batshit insane the story is.
It is pretty wild, and it is. It also,
Like for a
yeah,
concept, you would not assume they would take it that seriously.
yeah, and it also has a lot of like, if you're into SMT or even if you're into like visual novels, it has a lot of those like banter between party members hanging out.
I was surprised when you had mentioned to me that not only had you played a absolute boatload of Metaphor, uh, but out of all the games you had picked, Metaphor and Persona 3 over Unicorn Overlord? Because I feel like that is so more up your alley than both of those games. I was shocked you hadn't played it yet.
Yeah, you're not the first person I've heard that from. A lot of people were also surprised that I didn't play Unicorn Overlord. I think it was, again, just a timing thing. Everybody's told me, who I've talked to about it has told me I would love it. But I think, yeah, it's sort of a difference between, okay, yeah, like a new mainline Atlas RPG, even if I'm a strategy and tactics person at heart, is going to be higher on my playlist probably than, a tactics RPG that's like a new franchise that I've never heard of before. But what was
No, and I mean, especially like last year was in no short supply of not only good to great games, but like every game that was good, I felt like was hard pressed to not be like 80 to 100 hours.
Yeah, no, that like absolutely. Even the ones that were like more systems driven games like Helldivers, like yeah, that will eat like 200 hours of your life very quickly. So,
Yeah, I haven't even touched Helldivers 2, but that's one of those
yeah.
ones of like I loved the first one. I know I would love the second one. Was just like, listen, buddy, I'm drowning in like 80 hours of like backlog stuff already with it. Of like, I know Helldivers isn't going anywhere. And A, not the time for me to play it, and B, not gonna sign up for PlayStation Plus just to play it as well. So I was like,
Yeah,
I'll
yeah.
get to you. I'll get to you when I get to you. I'm just glad it was successful for that team, but that's definitely really, really highly up there of like ones that I'm like, God, I really want to play. I remember Astrobot was another one of like I played Astrobot so late into the year. I think I finally got it after Thanksgiving, and that was one of just being like, it's like being told how great something is going to be, and then that weird case of when you finally get to it, you're like, damn it, it's better. It's like, no, you're not supposed to be this good, Astrobot. I needed you to let me play other games.
Yeah, I haven't played Astrobot yet either. That was like the one that had all the game of the year, but there's almost always like one game every year that has like all this game of the year buzz that I just didn't get to at all. And that, yeah, Astrobot was that for me last year.
Did you play much of either Astro's Playroom or the VR one?
No,
I would at least say, because it is just straight up a free game on every PS5, it's at least worth checking out that, because like that is still probably one of the best like tech demos for the DualSense out there. Of just like, it's super fun, it's super short, it is basically its own little game, and then if you just want more of that but better, that's what the full game is.
okay, interesting.
And that's also the nice thing of kind of like I was talking about with demos is like almost every really good big release game last year had some kind of demo to play into. And the funny thing is like I heard so much good stuff about the Unicorn Overlord demo, but because I was still so deep into Persona 3, I was like, okay, I'll download it and then I'll wait till I buy the game. I'll wait till I buy the game. And then I got the game because it was on some like crazy crazy cheap deal for the collector's edition. I was like, okay, cool, I'll pick that up, and I was like, I'm just now getting into it end of February, almost 11 months later, and it was like, just like I know like for like the most people, the funny thing is like it probably still seems like people like you and I play way too many games, whereas I still look at all the games coming out that I haven't even touched, where I'm like, oh man, I could really play way more. I wish I had the time.
Yeah, well, and especially because I'm developing a game now, so it's like I have even less time to play games that aren't for work than I used to. Um,
Oh God, yeah, I can't even imagine even more
yep,
with that.
yep.
Um, what's the so for you, you had started. I forget with it. Had you first played P5 or was it Royal?
The original P5 was like my first Atlas game that I had ever played.
Okay.
I was one of the people that that got on the train at that particular stop, as many people did.
I mean, hey, at least you didn't say Smash Ultimate. There's that. You could have waited another year
I
and been like, okay, thanks Sakurai.
I am a Joker main in Smash Ultimate, not because he's an S tier character, but because I'm a Persona fan. I'm always very clear about that. But yeah, uh, so
I think Joker, by the way, the ultimate aside, very underrated Smash character. I think because he was released so early, he never gets enough love. I don't enjoy playing him as much as I like Sora because I'm a Kingdom Hearts
Oh
freak.
yeah,
But I really like his character. They did a very good job with
it's a
him.
fun
Also,
character.
his attack neutral is just gun. Who
Yeah,
doesn't like having that?
exactly. I think that might have been one of the first memes I saw that got me interested in Persona 5, where it was like Pokemon Sword, Pokemon Shield, Pokemon Gun. Uh, yeah.
So you'd played P5.
Yes.
You had then really stepped outside of that world with SMT5. In that time, kind of leading up to last year, what did you like? What was your kind of journey you had played of games after SMT5? Like, did you kind of jump into stuff as it was releasing? Did you look into any of the older stuff? I haven't really bugged you about this. Like, what have you really played outside of Tactica and Reload?
Yeah, I mean it was Tactica and then it was Reload and then it was Metaphor. I haven't like tracked down a lot of the older stuff. I mean I have played Persona 4. That was in between P5 and P5 Royal, I want to say, is when I played
Yeah, that was
P4.
they released the PC port was 2020, the console port was 2023.
Okay, yeah. So I played it on PC, so that would have been probably before Royal came out. So I've played 3, 4, and 5, and SMT5 and Metaphor and Tactica at this point. I think is my scorecard for Atlas stuff. Yeah.
I like your scorecard looks more like a bingo card in this in the sense of like I've
Yeah.
got the very flashy Persona 5, we've got a PS2 port, we've
Yeah.
got a tactical RPG chibi spinoff,
Right.
and a complete fantasy reimagining.
Yeah. And Smash Ultimate.
And yes, it's true, and Smash because it is all canon.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, really, at this point, the
Yeah.
only thing you have to do next to just really throw everyone off their tracks is just like either play Jack Bros or the dancing games.
I have played a little bit of the P5 dancing game, and I think I played the P4 one at some point too. But yeah, uh, so that's not something that I own, but that I have played a little bit of. So.
Are you saying you're not someone who's looking to own three different versions of River in the Desert?
I would be honestly. That's probably my favorite song in the entire series. But
Listen, that song is really good. You can tell that dancing game released way too soon because of how limited that track list
yeah,
was. They were like, "Oh man, it's really
uh,
hard to really compare this to 10 years of Persona 4 spin-offs. You don't
right,
really have as
right.
much to lean back on."
Yeah, yeah. I will see it coming actually because there aren't that many options. Uh,
So with that, one of the ones I guess that's even more interesting, just because each one of the games you've really played, I'd say outside of maybe, and this will even kind of lean into the reload talk I'm going to ask you about later, just because each one of those games kind of evolve from each other. Less so with like P5 to Tactica, whereas that's definitely more like story and character wise.
yeah,
But like especially because all those really play so differently, and especially so kind of going from P5 to SMT5. One of the things I kind of wanted to ask you about with it, especially just because you do so many reviews like we had talked about, but also I'm a masochist. I like to look back at my old reviews sometimes and go, what was I thinking? Why would Spencer talk about Attack on Titan for the 3DS for 10 minutes? Let's listen to this video
yeah,
again.
yeah.
What was your kind of like what's it been like for you, all jokes aside, since your review of like SMT5 and stuff with it? Like have you had kind of like much reflection of that, whether it be positive or negative?
Yeah, I mean, I do revisit my old reviews a lot, and usually, I will stand by them in the sense of like, yeah, at the time, that's how I felt about it. And obviously, I think if you take any video game and I said, right now, today, you have to tell me how you feel about it, just right now off the top of your head, and you wait 5 years, your opinion will probably have changed. I would say most of the time, my opinion of a video game will change if you ask me today and then you ask me 5 years from now. So I don't know. It's not like it's not necessarily that I think like my old reviews are wrong or they're like cringe or they're hard to listen to or anything, but there's definitely a lot of context I have now that I wish I had had back then. If only because it would have, saved me from having my DMs blow up with a bunch of people getting really upset about like this fan war that I wasn't even really aware of, that some people just hate Persona so much and they don't want to hear you talk about Persona because it ruined their, gritty, whatever, franchise, uh, that, or, um, so I don't know if I was gonna like re-review SMT5. Maybe I will do like a blog post about Vengeance or something when I originally play it. I think the fact that my expectations would not be, oh, this is the next game from the Persona 5 people, definitely would have changed sort of how I reacted to different elements of it for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and what's really funny is like I'll still actually get comments on not only the episode I had you on where we talked about that review, but also kind of the spoiler cast of it. Um, a lot of the times I'll find it interesting of comments I'll get from that really leaning into one of like it's funny where when something gets kind of like joked on so much, it's really easy for people to kind of get lost in the actual like discussion or the point of it, of like especially when it's like a quote taken out of context of like a however many 100-word review, of like the point is almost never argued invalid. It's always either someone's like, oh, I agree with this, or I think this could have been mentioned more in context, or something like that. And it's like almost never do I get a comment of someone just being like, oh, this is factually wrong, this was bad, or I agree with this, or definitely should have had more like that. And I always kind of find it funny of like, not only is that a conversation that kind of will pop up either through like random algorithms or whatnot with it, because at least I would imagine, thank God it's at least not become a meme that lasted like more than like that release window. That's at least
Yeah.
I would hope you're still not getting like people tweeting about like, oh man, Persona without the heart, har har har.
No, no. I mean, that always tends to blow over pretty quickly. I mean, especially if you don't engage with it, which I think I did engage. I engaged with a lot of people on the SMT5 one just because I was trying to explain where I was coming from. But
For
generally, if,
sure.
if you're any kind of a public figure, if you're any kind of person who has like more than 1,000 followers on the internet, and you're getting hundreds of DMs of people being mad about something you said because like some YouTuber picked it up or something, always the best thing to do is just don't engage with them at all because they want engagement, and then that's going to give the DramaTuber channels like another thing to talk about because that's their income, and it's like, oh, we can make another video about how IGN is crashing out and this person is now arguing in the comments. That's like a whole other video. That's maybe like three more videos I could make about this situation. Whereas if you just don't respond to it, it tends to blow over pretty quickly. And there's
I
lots.
mean,
Yeah,
let's be honest though. Thank fuck you reviewed that game in 2021 and not 2025.
yeah. Well,
Holy shit! Holy shit! That would have been awful.
I was gonna say there have been times since then that I have gotten way more heat for other stuff. From like actual Nazis, not just mad Persona fans. So I'd go back to the mad Persona fans any day compared to some of the stuff people get mad at me for these days.
Well, and it's extra interesting too because I think like especially with a lot of like sub community genre like specific discussions, I'll see this even more so of like there are certain sticking points that either like to rear their ugly head or just bring up discussions that not aren't like there aren't warranted, but like it's a discussion that's needed to be had, not necessarily it shouldn't be something you only do on Twitter. Like,
Yeah.
there's a difference between this is a good conversation between two people talking versus let's only do this in like retweet replying every like 60 seconds at each other.
Right. Yeah. And it's like, yeah, it's always like it's very asymmetrical in the sense that I'm just one person, and if 200 people or 2,000 people or 20,000 people get mad about something I say, it just makes the app completely unusable for like 3 or 4 days because everybody wants to get their word in. It's like I can't even read it all, much less respond to it all.
Have you had any other games that kind of whether had a similar response, whether it be positive or negative, but like, have you had any other reviews that you would kind of like highlight that came up of like, here's something where either I was super in the review majority or super in the minority?
The other one that's a like game review wise, the other one is Path of Exile. The original, it wasn't even early access Path of Exile. It was like the 1.0 release of the original Path of Exile. I gave it like a 7.8, I think. Like it would have been an 8 by today's standards because IGN doesn't use decimal points anymore. And that's a really good score. In my book, that's a really good score, but people were very mad that it wasn't higher because Path of Exile has such sort of a devoted, uh, you know, fan community. And again, it was mostly over the score. It wasn't over what I said, which I tend to think I would rather you read the words and never look at the score than to look at the score and not read the words because I think I explained myself pretty well about why it wasn't necessarily, a 9 or a 10 for me.
What year was PoE one? Was that like 17?
It was out in early access for a long time, so I'm trying to remember when.
I weirdly remember more of the Kickstarter than I do the game release.
Yeah, so the early access release was 2013, but then it actually went into 1.0 in 2017, I think. Yeah.
Okay.
And then PS4 was 2019. So 2017 was when I actually reviewed it.
Okay. And so like mostly that one was one of like, and that's always like so funny when you see those reviews of like, and again same thing with like SMT5 is like your review of an 8. Hey, bad job complimenting this game.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you
Like I totally would understand. Like there are definitely like you'll see those like either feature. I think features especially are a lot more guilty of this now than reviews. Um, when you see the reviews that are like either one way or the other of like praising a game way too much and then just being like 4 or like or like disregarding or like being really upset about aspects of a game, like complaining for 90% of it and then being like, oh, but it was really good though, so it was an 8. Just being like,
yeah.
how did you get to this? But I'm like, I think that's definitely where like I think written versus video reviews kind of have a better chance to really kind of like stretch their legs and help you get there.
Yeah.
The way I've always done reviews for a long time, I haven't done a just pure written review that wasn't just verbatim written for a video. God, since probably literally when I worked at a newspaper.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and it was one of those ones. So I'd be kind of curious for you with it. What's your let's just use IGN as an example for it right now. How intricately are you tied to when you're submitting your written script? Are you working also in hand with the video production team on the video version?
I'm very, very closely involved with the video stuff. Like I will usually have I record most of the footage myself, and then I will have specific time codes like commented out in Google Docs for like each line of the script. It's like when I say this, we should be cutting to this because this they didn't play the game. They don't know what I'm talking about usually. So like I need to tell them where in the video clip does the thing happen that I am talking about at that point in the script. So that's like a whole at least extra day of work is getting everything ready for the video basically. I try to keep the script and the written form pretty close together because I don't want to write two different reviews. But sometimes there's like stuff that has to be cut out of the video for time that is only in the written. So I always tell people if you're going to do one or the other, I prefer you watch or you read the written version versus watching the video. Or I'll make some kind of joke in the video that like it doesn't really work without the visual element. So I either have to cut it out or rework it somehow for the video.
I don't remember if you've done this recently, but like, have you noticed a weird uptick, especially I think in just like overall video reviews from almost any outlet, of like including clips as like a like almost like a weird sidebar, or like oh, we're making a joke in the review, which I think is totally fine, but like this weird little thing of just being like almost like it's a Scrubs joke or like a Family Guy
Oh
cutaway.
yeah,
Just
they're
like I is this like a popular thing? Is this my old man moment of like I'm like, listen, I'm fine if you want to throw a clip of like Larry David in your review, but I'm like, this was not what we used to do back in the day.
it really depends on the editor. Like there are some like broad editing guidelines, but IGN specifically does allow like some flexibility. And I work with like 5 or 6 different video editors, probably sometimes more than that. Like sometimes it'll be a freelancer who I haven't worked with before. And they all kind of have their own distinct editing style, the same way that, you know, every reviewer kind of has their own distinct writing style. So some of them like to do more of the cutaway gags, and some of them are a little bit more serious. And yeah, it just depends on which editor is assigned to that particular video, I think.
What are your kind of thoughts as someone either from the reviewer side of it or someone like just watching it as like a just general games reviewing enjoyer? Like, where do you kind of land with those? Because like I said, I'm more taken aback by them. I'm never against it. Like, there are times I've laughed at them with it. It's just it's such a stark comparison to what I grew up on, which is so funny to say as if like game reviews have been set in stone for like X many years or whatever with it. But it's like I don't know. It's almost like a weird meld of where we're at now. Of like someone was like, you know what? Maybe G4 had some good ideas after. You know what? Maybe Morgan Webb doing a funny outfit joke in this review would help keep viewer retention.
The funny thing is, I think at least one of the video people did work for G4 at some point, so that might be an astute pickup there. You know, I don't really mind him that much. I like being able to write the way that I write. So, you know, if somebody's editing the video, I like them to follow whatever, you know, expressing themselves as an editor, whatever they want to do, usually. I don't think it's ever been like so distracting that, well, there's a couple times I think maybe it's been distracting to the point that I was like, maybe we should cut this. But
is there like such a thing as like final edit, like approval? Like who, like when, at least for like IGN or whatever, that like, is it that thing of, I just imagine it would just all be on the editor, or maybe even someone on the video team with it, of like, I just can't imagine like someone's editing your like 2 Point Museum review and they're like, guys, one was enough. 3 Night at the Museum cutaway clips, too many. We gotta get, we gotta cut them out.
Usually it'll be, I will screen it, the reviews editors will screen it, and then the video director or producer, I'm actually like, I'm not sure exactly what the title is called at this point, but it'll be 3 people that will look at it and give notes. And I think the final approval is usually the video producer, I want to say. But yeah, there's multiple rounds usually of like, okay, we're going to watch a cut of this, and we're going to give some notes, and they're going to make changes. And then we're going to watch like a version 2, and either that gets signed off on or that goes back for more notes. It's usually not more than twice that happens. Yeah, that's kind of how the process works.
See, I'm people in the comments listening to this, please let me know. Like, I'm such a like, I love the like how the sausage is made part of the like games media industry. as much of a disaster as it can feel like sometimes. But it's like it is just that funny, but just especially because it's changed so much in such a short amount of time over the years. Because I've been very, very on the outside of like the games industry in terms of participating in it, but covering it and looking at it for so long are very different things. But like I've been actively digesting it for like 20 plus years, but in it for about 13 or so myself. Like how long have you been writing again yourself?
My first published review that I got paid for was StarCraft 2 in 2010. My first review for a major outlet was in 2012. So yeah, it's been about 13, 14, 15 years depending on where you draw the line. Yeah.
Where are you kind of at, especially as someone who does a lot of like freelance work with it? Of God, especially the last year has just been almost. I almost feel like a bloodbath is like an
Yeah.
understatement for games media.
Yeah, I mean it's not in a good state. I mean the ad driven model, I think it's not even fair to say that the bottom is gonna fall out. I think the bottom has mostly already fallen out of it. And
Oh yeah, like I remember. Were you ever much of a Destructoid reader or
oh yeah,
person aware of
yeah.
that site? The like EIC getting let go and pretty much everybody. I think there's like maybe like a person or two still left on it for like posting like SEO farming things for whatever 10 pennies they're going to get from that nowadays. But like when Destructoid got basically nuked a couple of weeks ago, Jonathan Holmes had posted about it, who is someone I had met through being a part of that website, and it was just being like, I can't believe how like nothing I feel from this. Like this is a site I grew up
Mhm.
like every day going to, where it's like, oh yeah, like who was even left there
Yeah.
at that point with it, and that's like the weird thing, and like even as much of like with all the changes, like so many like sites big and small have kind of had of like who's there, like what is this weird, like because I think especially a lot of like the legacy brand websites kind of have that issue of like that ship of Theseus thing of like, okay, well the website name's there, but like who's there.
Right. And it's a huge problem that like institutional knowledge does not really get retained in games
No.
media because it's a constant churn. Like you can't really count on having like making a career and retiring on it because the jobs just don't exist anymore. Um, you know,
I mean, I feel like you don't even see those questions pop up anymore. Of like, I think it was way more common back in like even like let's say like 2013 to 2016 of, oh, I love talking about games. I love doing this. How do I get a job at IGN, or how do I get a job as like a freelancer, or how do I start doing reviews at like GameSpot? And it's that thing now where it's like there's no good answer you're going to want to hear, and
mm,
9 out of 10 times the answer is still the same as it was I would have told you back then of just start doing it yourself and networking. But now it's like that thing of like I need at least 16 asterisks next to it if I'm going to give someone advice of if they want to get into games media.
yeah, like I like honest. My honest advice at this point would be don't like just pick something else. But you know, because yeah, I mean,
Definitely unbiased answer as well.
I mean, like a lot, like a big problem, a big part of the problem is Google. A big part of the problem is just like the people who have the money don't really see value in it anymore. There's, you know, it's a
Yeah, it's unfortunately become a lot of name recognition over actual quality content, let alone anything else.
yeah, yeah. So, I mean, like YouTube in a lot of ways has replaced that like website you go to find out about games every day. Like people are just going to their favorite YouTuber instead, which some of them are very good. Some of them hold themselves to like high journalistic standards, and some of them really don't. Um,
I set myself, I
you
guess
know,
I hated myself for at least
yeah.
30 minutes recently. No, not even 30 minutes. I maybe lasted 3 minutes. I saw, because I've seen people post things about Asmongold many, many times. I've never actually watched any of their content. I just knew that for a long time the meme was they lived in a literal shithole. Um, there was a thing of like, oh my god, they're playing Yakuza for the first time. And it was really, really funny of like, I just watched this, just had less of like, oh, I want to see what this person thinks of the game, just being like, okay, this person heavily successful, talks about a lot of news, games, and other things out there. I definitely am not someone who ever finds myself agreeing with that individual. But it's like, sure, let's check out their stream. What is 100,000 plus people watching this guy? What are they getting that I'm not seeing? Because I'm definitely not the kind of person who follows a lot of like traditional like. I follow a lot more traditional media coverage and editorial stuff versus like I'm a guy live streaming a thing. Let me talk about it while I'm eating my lunch into the microphone. And it was just so funny of like I'm just looking at a dude for just like minutes on end, just going, huh, huh,
Yeah.
oh, that's cool. Huh. Just like, I'm like, oh my god. I'm like, I'm sure a part of it is just like, listen, man, if you say you really like him, that's on you. But I'm like, it's that thing of just being like, I'm so out of it, I don't even want to be with it, and I don't even know what it is.
Yeah, I'll plead the fifth on that one, because his fans already hate me, and like I said, the best thing to do is usually just not to engage with the drama. But
No,
yeah,
no, not at all.
I would say that your experience of that channel sounds about like what I would expect somebody tuning into it for the first time would end up feeling. So
It was. I will say though, the fans of the. Have you played many of the Yakuza games at all?
I have been playing them pretty actively the last couple of years, actually. Really loved Zero.
There were a lot of really great comments of people being like, "I can't wait for him to go from loving this game to saying it was dog shit the whole time when he finds out the main protagonist of this game is an avid cross-dresser."
Yeah. Sounds about right. Yeah.
It's like, dang it, silly Yakuza protagonist. Why couldn't you have just stuck to karaoke songs? Why did you have to put the wig on?
Yeah.
Well, speaking of a game that unfortunately does not have much cross-dressing, I tried. They didn't really want to do very much of it. A little indie game came out last year called Persona 3 Reload.
Yeah.
And for some reason you got the blue moon gun to your head itch in your head, and you started playing this thing. What was this for a review at all, or did this just kind of come from morbid curiosity / hype train?
No, this was definitely one that I was looking forward to, because going back to the SMT5 review, the conversations I had after that with like friends who had been fans of the series for a long time, they were telling me, okay, you got to play Persona 4 now, and then I did, and they're like, okay, well now you got to play Persona 3, and then you can call yourself a real Persona fan. There's still a couple holdouts that are like, no, you've got to go play Persona 2 or you're not a real Persona fan. But
oh my god,
most of them were satisfied when I finally played Persona 3, because the ones who were the most down on Persona 5, I guess, that was always the game that they said, yeah, no, this is the real Persona. This is the good shit. And I can see why, in some ways, they felt that way, having played Reload. But no, I was very excited to play it for the first time because of how much it had been talked up to me, and how much I like Persona 4 and 5. I was just anxious to get to some more Persona, and specifically the one that so many people had told me was the best one. So,
which is interesting, because you'd had no experience playing it before, right? Like you hadn't played any of the other.
I hadn't played
any
portable
of the other version,
FES. None of I hadn't touched Persona 3 at all before Reload came.
What was I guess your at least like knowledge base? Like, were you like relatively pretty spoiler free?
So, I unfortunately did already know the ending going in. Because like I don't exactly remember which friend told me about it, but it was like at a time where I was like, this shit's never coming to PC. Just tell me what happens. And then, lo and behold, it did end up coming to PC. I don't feel like that really affected my experience of it that much, though. Knowing sort of the MC's ultimate, fate. I guess probably P3 spoilers are okay at this point. The game's been out.
He's a sleepyhead. He just loves napping. He can't stop sleeping. I keep telling him, Jesus, dude, so we got like another 100 hours to play. Stop sleeping all the time.
So I knew that was coming, but I didn't know really much of anything else, like the plot details. I mean, obvious. I'm very good at pegging which adult in a Persona game is going to turn out to be evil. I have like 100% batting record on that. So I kind of figured that
They
out.
make it easy,
Yeah,
to be fair.
yeah. Like it's like okay, this is a type of guy that's the adult you're not supposed to be worried about. That's going to turn out to be evil. I getcha. Yeah. So yeah, I went in with very low knowledge. I think overall. So there was a lot of stuff that surprised me, like the October stuff. I didn't see any of that coming.
Well, this is extra interesting because you're like, I remember when I was talking about this game, you're like the edge case example of like who this game was made for. You really enjoyed Persona 5.
Mm-hmm.
Persona 6 is not ready yet. Let's just Persona 5 the fuck out of Persona 3.
Yeah, yep. And I really ended up liking it a lot. I can definitely see the people who were trying to convince me that Persona 3 is way better than Persona 5, which I still don't exactly agree with. I don't think maybe it's even possible to overcome the euphoria of your first Persona game necessarily. Um, yeah, but I had a really good time with it, and I can see what they mean when they say this is my favorite.
I've heard a couple people who have like interesting things with it because like even as someone who is not a like Persona 5 hater, far from it, I am definitely 9 out of 10 times if you tell me, oh yes, not only is Persona 5 my favorite game in the series, it's my favorite game of all time. It's like the best
Yeah,
story ever.
yeah.
Blah blah blah. My first response to you 9 out of 10 times might just be why. It's the word why.
Really? Oh,
Do I need to recommend you some more media? Are you looking for other? Did you stop after Persona 5? Like things like that. And it's what's funny is there wasn't really that much with Persona 3, but there were a couple of cases of I thought it was interesting people who had started with Persona 5 then jumping into after multiple other Atlas games had released, jumping into Persona 3 and really respecting a lot of its like themes and its like storytelling about like death and like moving on and like how to live your life and things with it that I really appreciated, even though like again much like Persona 5 I don't put like Persona 3 on like this holier than thou pedestal, but I thought it was interesting of like a game that story wise changed almost nothing really at all for a remake still hit as hard 18 years later. I thought was very interesting.
yeah. And like I don't have like the original to compare it to as far as what changed for the story presentation and stuff like that. But like I mean, I cried playing Persona 3. Like I you know, there's a specific moment toward the end where it's you're promising to show the people that like life isn't hopeless and stuff like that, and like I thought that was a very resonant point in our current times to just like be the person that demonstrates that like you don't have to give up, you don't have to just assume that bad things are inevitable and they will continue to happen to you. Yeah, I really like that
Yeah,
element of it.
yeah. The theming, especially of kind of hope versus hopelessness, is also another really good point with it. Of, and again, kind of funny of not really a, like there was no real push for this game to get remade. It was still very playable, and I know the debate between which version is best versus whatnot. Like those themes are still in every version of that game you're going to play, whether it be original, Fez, portable, reload. Like they're all there outside of the dancing game. Like you're going to have those like thoughts come up. God, it would have been great. It's like, you know what? I love dancing, but existential crisis
Yeah,
really gets
yeah.
me going. But it
Yeah.
is just it was just so interesting to see that kind of held up as much. And what was funny is I didn't really have ever a lot of issues with Persona 3, but because it wasn't my first in the series, I kind of held it up there as a like my go-to comparison is always like this. I am a huge Final Fantasy fan as well. I never understood the fellatioing of 7 for so many years. Like, I love Final Fantasy. I love almost all of them. It's one of my favorite series of all time, but 7 was one of those funny ones of, like, it just didn't, maybe my age, my situation, could be so many other things. It just didn't hit me in the way that it hit so many other people nostalgic-wise, that it took up until Remake coming out for me to really appreciate that game way more. And the same thing happened with Reload. Of playing Reload all these years later, after playing it for so many times, of just being like, wow, same thing for me. Of like, if you had told me, Spencer, do you think you'll cry at any point in a remake of Persona 3? I'd be like, hell no. I'd be like, A, please don't remake Persona 3, and then B, I'd be like, there's no way I would cry. But the same thing happened with me, of like, that game still got me in so many different ways that I was so kind of surprised by it. I was like, dang. I did not see that coming, or I just, I don't know. And it's interesting because as someone who's played every version of this game, this is doing nothing different outside of putting a new fresh coat of paint on how it is presented and adding a lot more voice acting. Although I will also say, man, the voice actors in this game, very fucking good.
Oh yeah. Yeah, the voice cast was great. I also think I went and looked back like what Tartarus actually looked like in the older
night
ones.
And day.
It's like
night
I don't
day.
think I would have had the patience for that, honestly. Like obviously it's not like the same depth as like a P5 dungeon, but I think the way that they made Tartarus more consistently engaging, I think it ended up being very successful to the point that like I did a lot of grinding, and I hate grinding in most RPGs, but like I did a lot of grinding in there just because the grinding was actually fun. So, yeah.
For you, and by the way, the nice kind of comparison between this is we haven't had a chance to really talk about this too much on the show. I cannot believe that Reload is already over a year old. Jesus Christ!
Is that really?
Where does
Yeah,
time go?
because it was February, like mid-February last year, I want to say.
It was February 2nd. It was like the first
Yeah.
week of February.
Yeah. Yeah, that was like my life for quite a lot of last year. I don't think I finished it until September or something like that. Yeah.
It was my most played game last year.
Wow.
I put even more than Rebirth. I put I think 150 to 160 hours into it.
Yeah. That's.
And that one's a little bit harder to skew because I also played the DLC.
Oh yeah, see, I still haven't played that yet, and there are like people who are telling me, "Yeah, don't play it. It's the ending's better if you don't play the DLC."
No, those people, I would like hard. I will mansplain them into submission. That's very wrong. That's not true.
Yeah.
And this is coming from someone who I would have told you that. Not that it ruined the ending, but so the DLC episode, I guess, is a remake of The Answer, which was the expansion pack released back on the PlayStation 2. The Answer is like the most, like, it's that era of like PS2 RPG re-release of like, all right guys, we've got $100,000, we are releasing the greatest hits version of the game a year later, and you need to make 10 hours of gameplay last 60 hours.
Wow.
And it was one of those things that it's a really interesting concept, it's a really interesting idea for continuing the story in a way that they've really never done before, but the grind of it, the lack of production value in it, even back then compared to the original game, was so apparent that, like, even me at the time, I was like, The Answer was such a slog. It was like, I think I played it 1.5 times, maybe even that. Like, I rolled credits once, checked it out when they put it back on the PlayStation 3 as like an emulation, and just never wanted to touch it again. It was like one of those things of just being like, cool, I get it. And it was always a thing, ironically, if I would tell people like, oh, well, why did they release Portable all these years later and never include The Answer? It's like, they might say it's a space issue. It's like, no, that would not, like, that did not translate well. That story needs a lot of work. That it needed a lot more time, it needed a lot more money. It was not a thing you could just quickly make good.
Mm-hmm.
And when they announced that they were doing this as like some big DLC expansion, I was like, okay, well, I'm going to cover it for the show, but you're coming at this from the perspective of like, this is like one of my least enjoyed things in the entire series. The answer was very much like it was my big thing I would always make fun of just being like, yeah, like you can skip this one, you're fine. Which from a series that has 5 mainline games is really saying a lot. And the fact that I beat it, enjoyed it, put I think almost like 40 to 50 hours in it, and I did not need to do as much as I did. It was just one of those things, just being like, wow, like I played this way more than I thought I would. It was still somehow shorter than the PS2 original, thank God. They added more story. The changes to the levels was way, way, way better. Like, if you thought Tardos looked boring on PS2, the levels from the answer are just like, oh my God, can I just, like, please go back to the Green Tower? Anything but this. Uh, and so it didn't make me do like a 180 in terms of like, oh, I love it, but it's definitely that thing now of like, if you like even remotely really like, I shouldn't even say this. If you rolled credits on Persona 3 Reload and went, wow, that was really good, you owe it to yourself to play the answer.
Okay.
Because it is such a nice epilogue, not in terms of its like story, so, like in terms of like, oh, it continues the story in such a nice, neat way. It's meant to ask a lot of questions and show a lot of things of how how did this ending affect this party? Like what does this mean for like the team after the events of this game? And it has a lot of nice new story content that they added just for this, which was very needed.
Okay. Well, sometime between like SMT5 Vengeance and like the other 40 things I have to play, I'll try to find time to check that out then.
And it's not going anywhere,
Yeah.
which is nice. The only actual complaint I think I ever really had with the game was I think the way that they had rolled it out was very needlessly complicated. It was that thing of they tied it into a season pass that released a month after the game came out, but the DLC wasn't going to be out until 9 months after the game was out.
The other really interesting thing with playing Reload though after having played 4 and 5 previously is like I could definitely see the progression of ideas in sort of like a reverse order, which was kind of interesting. Just like like the way that S links are structured, and like the fact that I still think one of my biggest criticisms of P3 is that the main plot, there's not a lot happening for a lot of that game. Like you don't really know what's going on until pretty late into the story, and I think that's something that they tightened up. I think there's like philosophical ideas in 3 that they gave like a deeper exploration to later on, particularly in like Mementos and P5. Like that was really interesting to see. Like, all right, this is like the seeds of some stuff that I am already familiar with. I can see where they were planted, which was cool.
No, I definitely get that, especially in terms of timing for Persona 3 is so funny.
Yeah.
Like, there's like that moment of like once you've recruited Fuka to like getting to summer meeting Aigis, it's like, oh my God, did we just forget there was other things to do in this game?
Yeah, and it's like, okay, the full moon is always there, and we're kind of waiting for that. But like, what the game is actually about, it's like very, very, very late that you actually learn that. Like, I don't think the name Nyx is mentioned until like November.
Oh no!
Like,
I mean,
like,
I don't know if you remember this,
yeah.
but do you know what the original story for Persona 3 was called?
No,
It is literally called The Journey. So it's like, listen, they knew.
Okay, yeah.
They took that literally. They were like, we're not rushing this thing.
Right. But I could also see like how they've sort of evolved as writers. Not to say that the story in P3 isn't very good, but just like how suddenly like, okay, this new kid shows up, and then like, by the way, the world's gonna end. Like that all sort of happens so abruptly that I think later on they got better at sort of dropping hints about where things were going, and like weaving stuff that was going to be important later, weaving it earlier on into the story.
No, I would I definitely get that as well. Were there any like, not like to get like too spoilery with it, were there anything either story wise or gameplay wise that really sort of surprised you?
I mean, like the October stuff was like where with like Kenji and his whole, or not Kenji, um,
Shinji.
yeah, like all the stuff with the gun, where I was like, okay, yeah, I can see why people were saying that this is the dark one and Persona 5 is a baby game. Uh, you know, even though I don't
What a baby
I
game.
don't disagree, I disagree with that, but like I can see why. Okay, if you played this when you were 13, yeah, like that's pretty hardcore. That's pretty brutal. Was not expecting that scene at all. And I really liked. I think that Junpei in P3 is the character I had the most of a turnaround on, maybe
Oh my god, yeah,
in
like
the
from
entire
from
series.
jealous side member to like heartbreaking love story.
Yeah,
Like where did this come
where like
from?
you take someone who's like kind of a dick, and then he goes through like real shit for the first time in his life and sort of becomes a man by the end of it. Like I don't think really any of the like bro characters in the other Persona games have that same arc. He grows up so much. Like I really liked that, and it's just kind of a great cast all around. I like just having a dog better than having like an anime animal mascot that talks.
Not talking
Well,
dog
yeah,
specifically.
Koromaru. Yeah, he's the goat, the best to ever do it. So yeah.
One weird complaint that it is such a non-issue, but I just think about
Yeah.
this especially because like when I see people sharing the voice actors of these games, when I think about the fact that Koromaru could just have been a recording of an animal, but they purposefully paid some like 40-something Japanese man to make these noises. I
Yeah.
just always think to myself, why? Why did we do that? Why did we feel the need to not only do we half-assed it too? I'm not going to mix bones about it. We paid one man to do a dog voice, and you were cowards and couldn't pay someone to do those dog noises in English.
Is it the same? Oh, it's the same
It's the
voice
same
actor?
guy, and I'm
Oh.
like, because when you look at the credits, it's like, oh yeah, and we've got blah 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 again doing Korvar, and I'm like, listen guys, if we're gonna lean into this, I want someone to pay D. Bradley Baker to make dog
Yes,
noises.
exactly. Yeah, he's the guy. He's the guy you go to make animal noises. So yeah.
No one, by the way, no one more excited for a new Avatar show to be announced than D. Bradley Baker. That man got at
Yeah,
least
yeah.
3 Lambos on the way.
Yeah,
He's like, thank God.
he's gonna be getting some work for sure.
It was like that was like I assume half of his income was just all right in the early 2000s Avatar money, 2010s Korra money,
Yeah.
and so now back it up. Let's get some 2020
But
money.
what are the residuals on that? Like, if someone buys an Appa plushie, does D. Bradley Baker get paid? Like, I wanna
Only
know
if
that.
there's a noise clip for it. But with
Yeah.
how much Avatar 1 gets in syndication and with
Yeah.
streaming, I bet he does stupid residuals.
That's true. That's from
Because you also got to remember a lot of the kids who did especially Avatar 1. Korra was mostly adults, but Avatar 1 was a lot of kid voice actors. No residuals on Aang,
really.
Katara. Yeah, I think the oldest one there who would have gotten any residuals would be Dante Bosco. He was definitely over 18 when he was doing Zuko, but like none of the kids in Avatar got any residuals.
Don't like even after they turn 18, they don't get any.
It doesn't do retroactively.
Oh,
So same
man.
thing with all the live action stuff. So Miranda Cosgrove, almost no money from iCarly.
Jeez,
Nothing.
That's ridiculous.
Only why do you think they come back to do the new show now that they're adults?
Yeah.
It's not for the love of the iCarly lore. It's
No.
like, god damn man, I need to make some residuals.
Gotta get that syndication money printer going. Before I get too
There's
old
a
to
there's
do
a great
this.
clip of Josh Peck getting interviewed by somebody. It was like some extra. He wasn't an extra because he had a voiced line, but it was like some like guy who's done a bunch of Hollywood stuff for it, and they were talking about this, and he's like, I'm in one episode of Drake and Josh, and I probably get maybe a couple $1,000 for it every year ever since it aired in like 2005, and then like the dude from Drake and Josh, $0.
Oh man. Oh, that sucks. Yeah.
And I mean, it's even worse for video game
Oh
I mean,
yeah,
like,
oh
I was
yeah.
just thinking about this recently of, like, I need to invite some of our voice acting friends back on the show just to talk to them about, like, I think about this almost, like, once a week of just being like, that, that SAG strike is not over. I think people keep forgetting that that's still going.
Oh yeah, it's been causing like one of the latest controversies is Hades 2. There's like a dispute between the studio and one of their voice talents about the whole SAG thing.
Which really weird because, like, you would think that you would think at least that. Oh, damn it! Why am I forgetting Supergiant? You would think
Yeah,
Supergiant would like be one of those studios who would just sign because voice actors can work right now. Voice actors just can't work if the current studio is not willing to work under their demands. They're on strike for. So like if you sign, there's like a term for it, it's like an intermission or something or whatever with it of like if you basically agree to their demands now before the strike has been successful for the whole union, you can record new stuff, which is how a lot of things has been still been going. But like yeah, Hades 2 and like I don't know if you have any like if you or have any friends who play MiHoYo stuff, MiHoYo has just been so fucked and it is so funny.
oh really? I didn't realize that was affecting them.
Genshin,
Yeah.
Honkai, probably less for Zenless Zone Zero, but definitely Genshin has had major updates where they've had to put in the patch notes. If you're playing this in English, there might be only two characters with voice acting. Everyone else is all union, and we
That's
can't
true.
hire them
Yeah,
back.
yeah, because they would all the American voice actors would be. Yeah.
So it's that thing of just being like, damn. And I think I forget the name of the voice actor who does Paimon, who's like the little like Morgana like
Uh-huh.
mascot character for Genshin. But I always think it's funny that like they are always one of those characters still. It's like probably like not a good look that the mascot character is the only one who's the scab.
Yeah,
It's like,
yeah,
don't worry,
yeah.
guys, I'll be here for the voice acting. It'd be like, hey, Persona 5 Tactica came out, but we only got voice acting for Morgana.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it is kind of funny though. Like that would be the one person to cross the picket line. I wonder what SAG-AFTRA's guidelines would be on switching your game language to Japanese. Like, that is that not supporting the strikers? I don't
You could do it. The only trouble is the Japanese voice acting industry is insanely hard to get into from like a games and media thing, and it's not because of there is a lot of um, room for like, ironically I think the Japanese and definitely the Eastern voice acting market is a lot less incestuous in a lot of ways, especially for big projects. Like we're a lot better than we used to be a lot like way back in the day, but like man, there were the memes were true for every Nolan North and Troy Baker game that would get announced of just being like where's everybody else getting stuff? And you saw a nice rise up of new people showing up, but the problem is that usually only happens during these long strikes
know.
because these strikes are going on for so long that these new voices are coming up because they're non-union. But in Japan, the tricky part about that is they definitely don't have any unions over there for voice acting. But the trickier thing for Japan is it's such a long-standard culture of like this person does this role for like the rest of their life. Like this guy's got to die before we ever like they waited almost 10 years after the death of the guy who played Igor to finally replace him. Persona 3 Reload is the first time they recasted him in English. In Japanese. He'd been recasted in English almost like 8 years ago.
Oh wow, huh?
So there's just a lot of extra kind of hoops and things to really jump through because of how coveted voice actors are over there compared to here, which like I think just kind of goes unfortunately to show how disposable a lot of the industry treats voice actors. But that's again its own other whole thing because I think last time the voice actors had a big strike, a large part of that was mostly safety concerns and money for royalties. But I think the royalties discussion gets really fucked with game development when you start thinking about it in the sense of game devs. Because it's like,
Yeah,
it's this cascading effect of no one's wrong, but no one wants to ask when does the money stop flowing, you know?
Well, that's sort of how I've been viewing the whole Supergiant thing. Is like I feel like this is probably just a shitty situation for everybody on all sides of this. I'm
sure.
not going to make like a judgment about it. Yeah, like I'm a very pro labor person in general. I'm a pro union person. It seems like this is just a case where it's like a corner case that like there's not like a really simple solution to it. Um,
Well, it had happened at like one of the worst times. It happened after two major Hollywood strikes ended before it had even started. Because remember, there was that one in 2022 that went on for quite a while with the actors and the screenwriters.
yeah, yeah,
And that one had a lot of momentum into it because they were happening at the same time, and a lot of major productions got held back in a way that was really affecting a lot of the companies, that they had a lot of leverage, versus this one is just for voice actors, is not for acting. The companies are at a time where they're being as scrupulous with their money as possible. Like, a large part of it is also like, damn man, I don't even know how a lot of these voice actors have been getting on outside of a lot of like strike funds, just because like this has been going on since August of last year and shows no sign of ending. Like, when is the last time you even remotely heard an update of like, oh, we just had negotiations again? Like, they haven't had actual like progress in terms of like negotiating to get better contracts even remotely close since I think November, October of last year, and it's all because the whole big stick up this time is AI,
right.
and no one wants to give.
Yep, yeah, yeah.
Which I think is at least a little bit. This one definitely seems a lot more clear cut than other times there've been like SAG after strikes of like. I think a lot of people can all universally agree the only way that people are going to be using voice acting with AI is just in cost-cutting procedures, which will lead to worse quality content.
Yeah, and it like there needs to be protections for like people who don't want their voices used, recreated with the AI. I'm very much in that camp as well. So, yeah, I don't.
Yeah. I don't envy anybody who's in it, at least from a like having to be on strike sort of way, but it is like we're not running out of games, but it is definitely going to be that thing of there are major AAA games that are currently in development that could have probably come out sooner or have easier times coming out if it wasn't for these strikes coming up. Because really a lot of voice acting is kind of mostly affected 2-ish years or less in advance. Where, like, I think that's when we're really going to start seeing stuff is, like, the games that were supposed to come out this summer, this fall, next year.
Right. Yeah, I know different different studios can like do it at different points in the process, but that's usually about the cadence, I think, for most, at least bigger projects for sure.
Well, I like that the depressing, death-filled world of Persona 3 somehow brought us to SAG voice actor strikes,
Yeah.
but still, nonetheless, there was another thing I was going to ask you about Persona 3 Real that I was curious about with it. What did you play it on, by the way? Did you do PC?
Yeah, if it's available on PC, I will usually always go for PC. There is some stuff.
You're not. Are you mostly like a desktop person, or are you like did you mess with it at all, or do you do any like of the portable systems at all?
I do have a Switch. Like I've there are certain games I've.
Sorry. I should have said like in the sense of like with the PC handhelds that have been getting a lot bigger.
Yeah.
Like, are you like a Steam Decker or a Rogger, whatever they call themselves?
I had a gaming laptop for a long time. This might finally be the year I break down and buy a Steam Deck. We'll see. It kind of depends on like what
you know the second you buy one they're going to announce a Steam Deck too, though.
Yeah, well, and I'm also like kind of waiting to see with like Switch 2 because like I'm not going to buy a new console just for Mario Kart. I want to see what else they have coming down the pipeline, but
That's true.
yeah,
Mario plus Rabbids 3.
yeah, that would be an interesting one. So yeah, I'll see like what the first year of Switch 2 looks like, and if it's like, I can live without that, I'll probably finally end up getting a Steam Deck this year.
I like that. I like that self-control entirely for new systems. Anything else, like I'm really good at saying no and being a cheap ass,
Yeah.
but you have to actively try for me to not want you if you're a new shiny piece of hardware, which makes it extra funny that as time has gone forward since announcement and post-launch, how little fucks I continue to give for the PS5 Pro. That is one of the funniest hardware launches I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah. I mean, I still don't have a PS5 yet because the only exclusive I really would want to play is like the Demon Souls remake, and like that list hasn't gotten longer because like everything's on PC now. I had to wait a year for Rebirth, but
Can I interest you in a worse playing version of Civ? Would that what would that?
yeah, let's say.
You know what I will say though. I've held it in my hands. I saw someone who bought the Switch version. I physically cannot believe that is on Switch.
Yeah, like the Civ 6 port for Switch was actually like surprisingly good, but yeah, Civ 7, I don't know. Yeah, haven't tried it, and I'm skeptical. So,
My expectations are very low,
yeah.
mostly just because I peaked at Civ Rev 2 on my PlayStation Vita, and
Oh
I've
no.
never looked back
Yeah,
since.
that was a disaster.
What? That's like the best way to play that version. What do you
Well,
mean?
Civ Rev 2 in general, I don't think should have existed.
Civ Rev 2, yes. Civ Rev 2 blowed hard.
Yeah.
The version on the PlayStation Vita is Civ Rev 2
Oh,
Plus,
is
which
it?
had
Okay.
exclusive additions and fixes, I think, a year or two after the original.
Oh.
It is far from better, but if you're someone who liked... did you ever mess with, like, the DS version of Civ Rev 1?
Yes, I have played that actually.
It has a lot of similar kind of comparisons of like how that plays. It's a lot. They fixed a lot of the issues. They made it a lot more fleshed out, and they fixed so much more of it. Which is funny because like my only like real Civs I've ever really sunk my teeth into a long time were I think Civ 3, 5, Rev 1 on DS and PS3, and then Civ Rev 2 on PS Vita. And the funny thing about Civ Rev 2 was like the fact that like 2K even officially made that was so funny because it was like made by 2K China. It was like such an afterthought for the Western market. They also did like a port of XCOM, which is extra wild.
Oh, really? Huh.
There's it's the mobile port of both, but it's like a completed version, so it's like all the patches, all the updates, all the other stuff, but it just plays on the PlayStation Vita natively. The funny thing, by the way, with XCOM, it's just called XCOM Plus, but it is also the entirety of Enemy Unknown and Enemy Within.
Really? Interesting.
Yes.
I had no idea that existed.
If you ever want to look at, by the way, at the duality of releases, I own a physical copy of Civ Rev 2 on the PlayStation Vita. They made one only in Asia, and the cover is fantastic.
Huh.
It is like, if you ever wanted to look at what does anime Abe Lincoln look like, it's that.
I feel like I could Google anime Abe Lincoln, and I might not like what I find. But yeah. Yeah, to actually answer your question, yes, I mostly played Persona 3 on desktop.
I can't believe I forgot I just asked you that.
Yeah. Well, you said there was another question that you wanted to ask. So.
Yes, I was curious how you felt graphically. I think Persona 3 has been an interesting one of some people liked how it looked, some people thought it maybe looked a little bit too bland by modern day standards. I think what's kind of funny about it is, especially because you've played Metaphor, I think stylistically wise, both like Metaphor and Persona 3 Reload stand out as video games in 2024. I think technically Metaphor is a worse running game and sometimes even looking game, but like overall the like art style they chose for Metaphor looks better. But I think like from a Unreal Engine 4 game by comparison, it looks much better than I would have ever guessed like a simple UE4 remake would have been for something of a PlayStation 2 game.
Yeah, it definitely runs better, and I would even agree that in most cases it looks better on PC at like 4K. Part of that could just be like the art style, I think pops a little more in P3. Metaphor grew on me, but like I kind of felt like it was a little too gray, maybe at times. Like it's kind of like washed out watercolor, sort of. Um,
The side dungeons were not doing it any favors.
yeah. Um, so yeah, I think probably P3R is their best looking game so far, which is interesting because you would think with how big they hit it with Persona 5, you know, we would be seeing like a much bigger step up maybe in production value, but I'm also fine to have one studio who doesn't like hyper focus on that like most of the AAA ones do.
It's also tough just because the dev teams went in such drastically different positions and are in such drastically different setups. Like with P Studio, where they went with Unreal Engine 4 eventually, I think was definitely the right call. I think to the detriment of the visual quality, Metaphor should have changed engines. I think for the fact of that studio feeling more comfortable with those dev tools since they've been using them for so many years, the fact that they stuck with the original P5 engine for Metaphor made sense. Does that mean it is just a glorified PS3 game in my heart? 1000%.
Right. Yeah, it's
the real interesting question is like, what does that team want to use next for an engine? Because I think at this point it's very safe to say that I don't even know actually. I would assume at the very least Persona 6 in my heart of hearts has to be UE5. But for the other stuff, I don't even know because they've used so many other engines as well. Like Tactica, Tactica and like Nocturne were all made in Unity.
mm-hmm.
By the way, Tactica being made in Unity, absolutely mind-boggling to me, just because a lot of Unity games do not have a great reputation.
It does. It kind of does have a little bit of the feel of a Unity game, though. Like if you know what
it does, but this is the funny thing. Sega especially is very guilty of this. Of a lot of times they're too cheap to pay for the Unity license to get rid of the logo. Tactical was the first time they ever paid to actually not have to include it.
Huh. Interesting.
So that was another funny one of like they don't even take that out of like Judgment because like they use Unity for all their emulation stuff in Judgment. So like they'll even leave it in those. So that was the funny thing of like I don't know if that was just because of them being more extra proud of that or because Unity kind of shit the bed in 2023. Could be either or. But that was one of those funny ones of like yeah they've really worked on so many engines at this point. The only way I would be shocked is like if SMT6 gets announced as a Switch 2 exclusive running on Crytek 3.
Oh man!
Like that's the only way they can really shock me, really.
Right. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how like P-Team and Studio Zero diverge more as like more and more projects get added on both sides. Because I guess we can kind of see what they both care about somewhat from Metaphor, but I don't think we've gotten like a really clear picture yet of like what parts of the DNA are going to each side.
Yeah, and I mean, I think because especially Metaphor went in such a different direction, even following something like Persona 5,
Yeah.
That's kind of the fun thing, at least with them, of like, I could see them cranking out another one because of how popular it was, or I could also just see them pulling something crazy out of their ass and doing something totally unrelated like another Catherine.
And I would like, I actually have a crazy tinfoil hat theory about Metaphor, which is
we welcome those here.
Yes, so my tinfoil hat theory about Metaphor is that it was originally supposed to be even more different than it is. And there are a couple places where I can see this, where they had to maybe walk it back a little bit. But I think the original idea was probably that you were going to go on this grand adventure around the country with the Persona calendar system and that you wouldn't be able to backtrack. And I think they broke down and added teleportation later because they realized it was going to break a bunch of stuff and it was going to be way easier to fix it by just letting you teleport. So I would like to see if they could make a game where it's like, yeah, no backtracking. You're going on this journey and you're going to have to manage your time, but you're also going to have to manage your distance, you know, and I would like to see them give that another try. If in fact I am correct that that was the original idea for this game.
I could see that as well. Because there's only really a couple of concessions they kind of had to make with it,
Yeah.
especially because I think if you fiddle around speed of it takes X many days to get from this town to the
Mhm.
other, there's really not that many things you kind of have to fiddle around with, especially because then when you get to the later half of the game, travel time is just completely removed.
Right. And I think you could fix it. You could fix a big part of like why that wouldn't work in Metaphor by just like having the Gauntlet Runner be bigger and all of your S links are coming along. Like they're just going to be hanging out on the ship. Like Maria's going to be there. It's going to be a good time. That way you don't have to worry about, oh, I can progress this S link next time we're in the capital, which might be 20 hours from now. The other issue would be not giving players, enough rope to hang themselves with. Like you would have to make sure that they can't go back to this dungeon 3 times and then brick the game because they ran out of time and they didn't.
You don't want them to Majora's Mask themselves.
Yeah, so like I think you would have to structure it in a way where you know you have enough time to do everything in an area before you completely move on from it, and it's not actually possible to like not get to the end of the game in time. But
Kind of related, because I guess I can actually ask you about both of them for it.
yeah,
Persona 5, one of the weird weaker points for me is the higher amount of social link possibilities didn't necessarily always lead to ones that I loved. There were a lot of very forgettable cast members for me, versus going back to Persona 3, and especially with Metaphor, Persona 3 going back to is very funny, of like having a smaller list of people for social links, but having them kind of hit a lot harder. The voice acting being a big one for me, of like, I really loved almost everybody's social link in Persona 3, to the point of this was the first time I'd been like, oh, New Game Plus, I want to finish everybody's. I want to actually get every one of these seen and like get to experience all of these, to the point where like I never had that with Persona 5, even though I did it. And then let alone with the fact of Metaphor, where there's way less by comparison with Metaphor, but they're even stronger because of how like tightly woven everyone's kind of themes are to the story.
that's interesting because like I agree with you about Metaphor. I think that in P3 and P5, I would say the ratio for me is almost the same between ones that I say I think are really well done and ones that like I could have lived without this. I mean, everybody jokes about Kenji in P3, but I was one of those people who was like, "Hey, Kenji wants to hang out. You want to hang out with him?" I was like, "Nope. I'm gonna go find
There
literally
was
anything else to do."
There was a legitimate moment that I had to explain to my wife why grooming was in this game. She's like, "Is this not just grooming?"
yeah, and like you're like ERPing with your teacher in the MMO or whatever. It's like not really. It's more just she's trauma dumping on you. But
No, but
um,
it was just so funny. Of like
yeah,
I think the perspective of no context, and also from like a girl's perspective of just
yeah.
being like, this seems like way more problematic than it should be.
Well, yes, and like there was like the burger dude. Like I wasn't super interested in his social link.
Whoa, whoa, whoa! The Food
The
King?
food.
You saying you don't want the Gourmet King to be your top pick?
He's not at the top of the list. I didn't get very far into the French kid. Booby, is that his name?
Oh, all right. Now, all
I've heard
jokes
I need to go
aside,
back.
Babe,
I've heard I need to go back
Bebe,
because I missed a good one, but I didn't really do much.
Bebe is literally one of the best social links in the whole
Okay.
game. Bebe is so Bebe. That's a tough one. That one is very good. That was another one I didn't appreciate as much when I was younger
Yeah.
versus now, of just being like, oh damn, this one's good.
Like I really liked the Emperor. What's the student council guy? What's his name?
Really?
Yeah, because I felt like it was similar to Junpei, where it's like this is a guy who like I met him and I don't like him because he's wrong, but he realizes he's wrong and becomes a better person by the end.
That's true. He doesn't. He at least realizes it before he turns into a piece of shit.
And then the I think he's the son Link, the dying guy.
I don't even pretend to try and remember the Arcanas to them. I
Yeah,
just half-assedly try to remember their name. Be
yeah,
like, "Do you remember the long hair girl? Not the hot one, the really geeky looking one."
like there are some S links in P3 that I think are probably better than maybe all of the optional one, like all of the
I
non-party
don't know.
member
I
ones.
don't know if I would be in like. This is another one of
Yeah,
just might just be like perspective, and other ones for it of like I know realistically the hermit is problematic, the like MMO one.
oh yeah, yeah, yeah,
But it's also the I feel like that's one that gets blown out of water of like how serious it is. Like that
yeah.
one's not like a Persona 5.
No,
Persona
yeah,
5, he straight up is having sex with those
yeah.
women.
No, P5's problematic teacher relationship is a lot worse than the one in P3 for sure. So
Like P3
yeah,
at the worst, it ends with like did you finish that one?
yes, yeah,
Like that one at most ends with haha I might like you and we might go on a date when you're out of high school.
yeah.
Like that's the farthest it
Uh,
really went. Now, do you want to talk about me having to tell a small child on a playground that I'm going to marry her one day out of my command? I can neither confirm nor
well,
deny
yeah,
this.
that's another interesting thing about Persona 3 is that I think, like comparing P3R and Metaphor directly shows how much better Atlas has gotten at this.
Oh,
In
for sure.
P3R, in P3, the correct, quote unquote, correct answer in most social links is just to tell someone whatever it is they want to hear at that specific moment. Even if it's really, really bad advice, it's like just don't cause any emotional turmoil at any cost. In
Well, and it also sucks too because
yeah,
your choices, whether they give you social link points or not,
yeah,
they don't affect the story. So
right.
it's like, well, why are you even asking me then?
And then in Metaphor, I think that the correct option, the one that gives you the most mag, is usually the most intuitive option and the most socially intelligent option, which is a much better way
Yeah,
of
'cause
doing it. Yeah.
Metaphor had that extra funny one too. Of I really liked and appreciated in Metaphor. When did you notice those few times when you would get um, a delayed increase in
Yeah.
mag? It would
Uh-huh.
be like I didn't like that answer, but upon thinking
Yep.
about it, I
I
appreciate it.
loved that because every time I was like, I know this is going to make you upset, but I'm right. And then they rewarded me for it. And I was like, awesome. I love that. Yeah.
That's I feel like a really underappreciated thing of those discussions. But I think that mostly comes up is because there's really not a problematic person in Metaphor. Like there are like not good people sometimes or not good like things that will happen with it, but there's not the because I think kind of goes back to the quantity over quality discussion of I think there's interesting comparisons between like an Alonzo versus the dying kid in Persona 3.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like there's a lot of interesting kind of implications behind how both of those handle death and how to live your life, parents and like history and things like that. But there was at the very least there was never that moment in Metaphor where it's like, "Oh, Maria, I mean, I'm sorry to hear about your dad, but I don't think I should be telling you I'm going to marry you when you grow up."
Yeah. Yeah. Persona 3 also has I don't know how you parse like a metaphysical entity, but like Elizabeth, like that's canon, like they banged. That's it's a little a little iffy. But yeah.
I like
Yeah.
my games with no romance options and hand holding only. I only want to hold hands.
Oh well, see, that's really degenerate. Now, yeah. Now we're getting more problematic.
That's why Yufa was the best girl. She knew how wrong it was, but she did it anyway.
And that was like way more impactful though, that scene, than most of the like, BioWare mannequin humping that you get, in a lot of
I
Western games. So
a super
yeah,
aside, but just because you'd mentioned we were talking
yeah,
about Avowed earlier before,
yeah,
I don't think Avowed has a moment that kind of lives up to it with it, but I really appreciated the director's comments recently of why they didn't have a traditional romance system. Because, like, it was that thing of just being like, there are so many more interesting ways to handle romances in games that most games just never touch with a 10-foot pole.
right, yeah,
Because I feel like a lot of, and especially Persona 3, 4, and 5 are very guilty of this, are very boring with a lot of their romance options because it is, again, like you mentioned with the other social links, I'm going to tell you what you want until we either become best friends and or I sleep with you.
Right. Yeah.
And then you're dead to me. When you're rank 10, you can literally be dead to me. You don't exist anymore.
Exactly. Well, and I thought that like the types of relationships you can form in Metaphor are so much more interesting. Like Hulkenberg, like after she finds out who you really are, like that to me was a much more rewarding relationship moment than like if, oh, now you're gonna make out. Like it's like, no, I now know that I have this person who is like devoted to me and will protect me forever, which is really cool.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
think even jokes aside, like taking the Yuffie thing out of the situation, I think even looking at a much smaller character role, like looking at someone like a Brigida, of there are implications of possible admiration and romance there
Yeah.
that are way more interesting to think about versus if there was just a weird, okay, well now I get to hook up with the Igniter shop lady moment, that'd be like, this feels really out of left field.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of weird too, because like I think that like the fan perception is that like a lot of the horny stuff comes from Hashino, but now like I feel like maybe he's not like the source of a lot of that, just with kind of how almost
Well, that was always
chaste
the funny thing with
Metaphor
the
is.
Hashino memes of just being
Yeah,
like Hashino.
yeah,
Hashino's the first one to tell you he's going to throw himself under the bus of like he's in neat heaven. He's like, listen, buddy, I talk to like 3 women a day. That's about it.
yeah. So, but yeah, I didn't mind it at all that there weren't like more explicit romance options in Metaphor. I don't need that in every game I play.
Yeah, and I think like setting up and having those potentials for either like your headcanon make it a lot more interesting because like at least for me the way I play Persona games is I've unless like there's a specific trophy tied to it or something, and very rarely will I then even do it on the first playthrough. I will almost never do the harem route. I will
No.
find the one person I connect with or think might seem like a good fit, and I'll go with them. Like I think in Persona 4 I went with Yukiko, Persona 5 I went with Makoto, and I think for 3 Reload I went with Wait, did I? Yes, I went with Fuka. There was a couple because a lot of the girls you don't really get the chance to until the end of the story. It's
Mhm.
a little bit more rushed, but Fuka definitely felt like the most normal for me in terms of where my like kind of story was at with it. But it was just so funny of like when you just treat all these games that offer harem options as that's the only option to go with. It just makes it feel even more like hollow.
Right. Yeah. It's yeah, I've never done the harem rod. I'm too like pathologically monogamous to even want to see what that would look like. But yeah,
Persona 6, please do not implement thruples. I don't want to even think about
I
the
mean
implications of what that would mean.
it's fine if it's an option. Like I kind of liked in Baldur's Gate 3 that like there are certain companions who are okay with it and some who aren't because that's how the real world is. But yeah,
I don't know, man. I love Baldur's Gate, and I need to play more 3, but, like, I think we do need to always take a step back and put, like, a little reminder that Baldur's Gate 3 exists in a very horny world. Like, a
true.
really
Yeah,
horny world.
yeah. It really gives Persona like a run for its money in terms of everybody you know
That's a
wants.
good back-of-the-box
Yeah,
quote. If we
everybody
could get
you know
another
wants to
reprint.
sleep with you. You know that's yeah, Persona and BG3. Yeah.
Metaphor's bear fucking scene would be if like Twitter canon was real and you actually could sleep with Luis. It's like, hey, I know it's the night before the election, but we just really need you to get plowed by this dude for 20 minutes.
Yeah. You know, there was definitely I think some intentional yaoi baiting going on there, perhaps.
Oh, dude, they know. They've I always joke one of my favorite
Yeah,
Persona artists of
yeah.
all time. His favorite character to draw is you and Adachi, and all of their art they ever do is just the most
Oh
homoerotic.
man.
There is no like hetero vibes at all when they're doing art. It's like, well, these two have clearly either just got back from copulating or are planning on it, and
Yeah.
there is never a moment in between.
Oh man. Yeah.
And listen, hey, I'm all here for it.
Yeah, no,
Um,
totally.
I always forget what episode it is, but still probably one of my top 5 Matt Berry quotes will always be that one from What We Do in the Shadows of "Gay is hot, gay is in, I'm with gay, and gay's with me."
Oh, that's such a great show. Yeah.
Well, on the topic of fantastic Matthew Berry recommendations, I think we can start to wrap it up. But was there any other final last little bits you wanted to say that we hadn't either covered, or any last hot takes you want to let the world know about Metaphor and Reload?
Uh, it's a good time for RPGs right now, I guess. I mean, like Metaphor, I played through like almost back to back when I like it took me a long time to finish it the first time, but almost immediately when I finished it, I started a new game plus run and I beat the Apocalypse Dragon and all that
Oh, that
stuff.
guy sucked. I
Yeah.
fucking hated that.
Well, I had to. It was one
That
of those.
sucked.
It was one of those fights where I had to like go on YouTube and look up how other people had done it because I was so lost. I had never really gone into like the Instacrit money tycoon stuff.
You know what? I can at least get into this
Yeah.
because this is one of the things I wanted to get into in the spoiler cast, but it was like, listen, me just complaining about super bosses at hour 4.5 doesn't make sense. But
Yeah.
I at least want to pick your brain about this. So you fought all the optional bosses in Metaphor, right?
Yes.
So this is no spoilers if you've not played this. Spoilers, guys. Metaphor. They kind of shit the bed in terms of optional bosses. They just make you fight a lot of fucking dragons at the end of the game, and it's not like different dragons, just reskinned dragons.
And I got to the hardest one, the one you're supposed to do last, is the one I
Yes.
chose to do first on my first playthrough, just
Oh
randomly.
God.
And I was probably like 8 levels under leveled when I met him, and like it honestly was kind of cool because it took me like 20, 30 attempts, but I was like, all right, this is where I actually need to learn how this combat system works. Like, I experimented with so many different things and I was optimizing all these little details until I was finally able to kill him, and that was actually pretty fun.
I had that moment not with the super boss, but ironically, I didn't realize I had given myself the worst final boss possible for this game. So when I was finally about to beat the final boss, there's that moment in the final 2 areas where it says there's a lot of magla in this area. Do you want to keep exploring? And I was like, it's really late. I'm sure
Oh,
it's
no.
just like a couple more enemies to fight. I'll be fine. Let's just go. I don't need to do another boss rush. I'm already leveled up high enough. I can take him. And I didn't realize that the game doesn't really explain that to you unless you know what's going to happen to you. And it doesn't happen till the final phase of the game, which is like a 5-phase boss fight.
Yeah.
That do you know what happens if you don't properly
Oh, yeah.
prepare for that fight?
Yeah, like he can just
So
keep using
imagine me
possibilities, right? Yeah.
on that imagine me the final phase of that boss fight. I was doing that for 2 hours straight,
Oh no.
trying to beat it, because at that point I would have to go all the way back. Ironically, actually, I think because of how long it took me to beat him, it actually would have been quicker for me just to go and do all those bosses. But I was like, no, we are here. It is 2 o'clock in the fucking morning. I'm going to defeat this fucking boss with 15 turn icons if it's the last thing I do. And I did it, but it was that thing of just being like, I could not believe that this game was that hard. And then I quickly found out, no, I'm just stupid.
Well, I think at
but
least-
the game,
Yeah, you do get a trophy.
But you
I think,
can.
for beating him beating him at full power. I think you get a trophy for that.
you do.
Yeah.
You do get a trophy for that, which that actually ties into the dragon subquest more than the like boss gauntlet rush, which I thought was funny. But ironically, like my only other complaint with the Crimson Dragon thing, outside of it just being another palette swap, was the way the game handles New Game Plus does make it easier to fight him. The problem is it brings your level back down to level 1.
Yeah.
For really no reason. Because if you're going to bring me back to level 1, but I can still use level 500 equipment, the game is still broken
Yeah.
on New Game Plus. So that meant that I had to literally just do a whole second New Game Plus playthrough. I couldn't take down the boss until, I think, September.
Yeah.
And at that point, I was like, okay, I basically just replayed this game twice to get 1 trophy.
Yeah, it is kind of fun though. Like I did love how overpowered you are in New Game Plus in
Oh,
metaphor.
you're a beast,
Yeah,
especially because, like we said, at that point you've now experimented and been spanked enough into using the archetype system correctly that the game is just broken.
yeah. Like I think yeah, because after I did the dragons, I think like the next thing was Skybound Avatar, and I remember like Zorba shows back up and I just dog walked him. I was like, this isn't even a real boss fight. Like, you don't know what I've been through.
Yeah, I had done all those because I had done all the
Yeah.
optional stuff last.
Yep.
It felt like such a natural progression to me. Of like, I thought the game was balanced so well. That's why I was
Yeah.
like, I really thought I was taking crazy pills. Like when I couldn't beat this boss, I was
Yeah.
like, I can't suck this much. There's no way that this is possible.
Yeah. I just remember doing, I was also up way too late doing like the Tyrant Star stuff. And I just remember when I figured out what riding those elevators was going to do, I was like, all right, just show me the demon baby. I know you're going to make me fight the demon baby again. Just get it over with. Give me the demon baby.
It's that one guy from Catherine. He finally got a sneak in his baby boss fight again. He was so happy.
The one time, yeah, Gallica speaks what we're all thinking. She healed the demon baby? Yeah.
What's the thing I was going to say with it? The thing I wanted to then ask you, if
Yeah.
I'm not sure how much of a like optional new game plus, not new game plus, but like super boss kind of person you were for. I think traditionally Atlas games do a really good job of having, if not optional boss fights, really interesting secret characters. It's like one of the few places Metaphor shits the bed so bad, and it's so weird because they have really good enemy variety for the entire game
Mhm.
that it was like, for you, were you disappointed like I was by the dragons? And if so, or if not, what do you think would have been a cool, spoiler-free kind of super boss to include? Because like the only thing significantly cool about the Crimson Dragon, and most people probably don't even know this, is the Crimson Dragon was the first enemy they ever showed when they showed off the concept art for this game in 2016.
Yeah, I remember that.
Like that's it.
Yeah, so like I kind of thought that the shadow like the shadow protagonist or whatever was an interesting fight. I don't know if you did that one.
I think mechanically it's probably the coolest fight in the whole
Yeah,
game.
but yeah, the dragons definitely felt like yeah, okay, well I did the hardest one first and then like I went to the easiest one after that and I was like, all right, well that was a joke. And then like I think the middle one gave me a little bit of trouble. But yeah, they definitely weren't like ridiculous on the same level that like P3R's Elizabeth fight is. Like, you know, that really is like a test of all of your skills.
Did you mess around with the Joker fight at all?
In P3R?
Wait, hold on. I'm trying to remember. Is Joker in that, or is he only in the DLC? No, I think he's in the main game. Yeah, he
Is
is.
he? I guess I never found him then. I remember.
Joker, believe it or not, is actually harder than Elizabeth, and that's saying a lot because Elizabeth was really fucking hard.
Yeah, yeah. Like I think that might be the hardest fight, at least of what I played. That was the hardest fight in the entire game. But, yeah.
Did you experiment much with? I think Persona 5 actually probably has some of the best secret fights in the
Yeah,
whole
so
game.
the weird thing about Persona 5 is when I played it the first time, I didn't know who those people were. Like, because it has the protagonist from P4 and P3 in there. The
Oh,
same
I don't
bosses.
even mean them. I mean,
Oh,
like, I meant like the Velvet Twins.
oh yeah, yeah.
Their combined fight, and actually, I think like probably one of the least talked about or actually completed fights is, and this is probably due to the fact that there is no benefit for doing it. There's no story trophy. There's nothing. You really have to go out of your way for it. Did you ever fight Jose?
Yes, I did do that fight too.
Like
Yeah,
I
that
loved
was a good
those. I thought
fight.
those were
Yeah,
all really
yeah,
cool fights.
yeah. It's yeah. I don't know. It's I definitely see what you're saying with like the repetition, especially when you go to like the Apocalypse Dragon on New Game Plus. It's like, oh, it's another it's another one of
It's
these
just like
guys.
the world. Their
Yeah.
world is so interesting that I'm like, I just can't believe. even like, I don't even think this would be that exciting of a recommendation, but I would even take, let's have a fight with like the first king. Like, you know how they tell you
Yeah,
that
that'd be
story of the
cool.
first king and the
Yeah.
first fairy? Like, let's do that. Let's have a fight of you against the king. Um, I always forget his real name, like Harmonious the Fifth or whatever. Like, let's fight any of these people that we've heard about legends of, or even like something like, I'll even take like a fan service thing. Like, you can throw in like a SMT or like a Persona fight or something. Like, I don't mind when they do that. They probably over rely on it a little more sometimes. Especially, I think SMT is really guilty of like, you can only throw Demi Fiend into a game and expect me to clap so many times.
Right. Yeah. It becomes like a like the the Disney's entire marketing strategy for Star Wars now is just show thing you remember and then clap. Yeah. So,
I don't know. It's hard to clap when what is it? When the thunk is one shotting me on my first attempt.
yeah.
It's less
Yeah.
nostalgic.
Yeah. I did really like along those lines though the fact that they kind of hide until like the very very highest archetype levels, like all the tie-ins to previous SMT franchises in Metaphor. Like,
Oh yeah, the archetype payoffs are probably some of the
yeah,
best references in the whole series.
yeah,
Well, I'm excited for Metaphor 2 Electric Boogaloo coming 2023.
yeah.
Not anytime soon, but
2023 would be 2 years ago.
oh, that's true. Sorry. Can you tell I don't remember how time works?
No, 2030.
Coming 2032.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
but Lynn, thank you for talking absolute garbage with me for 2 hours.
yeah. Absolutely,
It's
it's
an
a fun time.
absolute nonsensical blast to have you back on. I need to make sure to not wait 5 years next time.
Yeah, when Metaphor Tactics comes out, that'll be great.
That would fuck so hard. Why did you even put
Yeah,
that
come
thought into
on,
my head? That would be legitimately cool.
make it happen.
Someone recently told me, by the way, that Metaphor was a better Fire Emblem cross Shin Megami Tensei than Tokyo Mirage Sessions, and I was so insulted that that was kind of correct. I was like, that's so wrong, but you're also correct in that assessment. But people, don't be mean to me just because I like the J-pop girly pop game on Switch. For the love of God, please.
Yeah, it's
So hopefully, I will say the one idea that I really do think you should commit to, if you get to it, just because, especially, it doesn't take as much and the game is dirt cheap. Let's assume the game's calendar is moderately correct, and after May, everyone shits the bed until GTA 6 comes out. If you get a chance this summer, I think even editorial-wise, it would be a cool kind of just comparison of the two. Really, with the time difference alone, jumping into Vengeance and even just comparing it, because I'd be curious almost if it's like, I don't even like say like, oh, it's definitely going to be better for you. It's at least just going to like, it addresses so many criticisms and complaints from your review specifically that I would be very curious what you think of the final game for
interesting.
Vengeance.
Interesting. Yeah, I will make it a fairly high priority to find time for that.
But besides that, where would you like people to be very nice to you and leave loving comments slash click all the ads on your reviews? Where's the best place that we can find you, support you, and follow you online?
Yeah, funny enough, I don't get a dime for clicks. So people who say I do stuff just for clicks, like I don't know, that might make somebody at Ziff Davis some money, but it doesn't make me any money. You can find me at len.bsky.social on Bluesky. I'm not really on Twitter anymore for perhaps obvious reasons. Uh, and yeah, like I said,
You notice how you never hear anyone when you say that, they don't ever go, "Why is that? How come you're
yeah,
not tweeting this much anymore?" No one's ever like, "What do you mean? Where'd you go?"
why wouldn't you put yourself through that on a daily basis? Yeah, I do a podcast called Three Moves Ahead. You can find us at 3MA, or idlethumbs.net/3MA on the Idle Thumbs Network. We also have a Patreon at patreon.com/3MA, which I do get paid for. So,
Thank God.
yeah,
Click that Patreon button, everybody.
Yeah, as a fellow member of what remains of the independent games media, you gotta support it or it's not going to be there anymore. So, yep. That's all my plugs. I guess yeah, you can also regularly find my work on IGN, PC Gamer, and Epic Games. So, yeah.
I would say if you ever have a slow week on the podcast, please invite me on. I will gladly go on a 2-hour deep dive of Civ Rev 2 Plus from the Vita. But I think at least the PC market maybe has a notable strategy game every 2.5 hours, so I doubt that's happening anytime soon.
Yeah, let me know what strategy games you're playing, and we'll bring you on sometime.
That's the thing. I love it, but because I play on console, they so rarely come to console.
It's
I'm. It's like I'm never surrounded by them. Is the thing.
it's starting to change though, especially like
That is true.
If the Switch 2 Joy-Cons work as a mouse, that's a game
It.
that's a game changer. That's like so many strategy games could come to Switch if it has
I mean,
mouse
even
functionality.
just if it does backwards compat support
Yeah,
to other
yeah.
ones, I would be interested in. Like, there's a lot of good mouse potential on there. As an avid
Yeah.
PC game hater, I do love the idea of having a mouse.
Yeah. It's good for a lot of stuff.
But yes, everybody, much like all the other things online, we also are shills and want your money. So the biggest shills, go to patreon.com/SMTN. We got to thank all of our super awesome, sexy shills on there. You can always support the show there. Get it a little bit early at the dollar and up tier. $5 and up tier executive producers get an extra special shout out. So thank you to all of ours. Real quick shout outs to Twist, John Massey, Crazy Sloth, Michael Wilson, Budweiser Tall Cans, Carlos Hernandez, Cross Renren, Winnie, Jagingis, Gorosero, Solaire, Stephen Yip, and Patrick Dissart. Thank you all so much. Len, thank you so much for coming on. It was fantastic to chat with you, and I will probably be very annoying and start DMing you more reasons to play Unicorn Overlord soon.
Sounds good.
But until then, goodbye, everybody. We will see you next week, and we'll see you then. Goodbye.